Do you want to know what I thought about The Last Jedi? Huh? D-Boy, do you want to? Do you want to know? Huh?
It was amazing! It's so good that when it comes out, you should buy it on Blu-ray!
So, do you guys want to know what I actually thought about The Last Jedi? What I really thought about it? It was okay. Now the reason I say that is because there are scenes in this movie that I like, and those scenes I love. But there are also scenes that I don't like, and I hate those scenes. It's kind of tough that this is a Star Wars movie because I just want to like it, but there's so much that was wrong with it, and at the end of the day, everyone has to realize this is a disappointing film. But let me start off with a couple things that I like about this movie, and yes, this video will contain spoilers, so you have been warned. I love the visual effects. Anything having to do with visual effects worked really well in this movie. I thought the scenes with the ships, scenes with the lightsabers, and scenes having to do with certain creatures looked really nice. The sound design was spectacular in this film. Anything having to do with lightspeed ships stopping, that just sounded awesome, and it seemed like you were actually listening to something new. I thought the sound design was spectacular and magnificent. There are scenes with Kylo Ren and Rey, and those scenes worked really well for the movie. I was engaged the entire time, I was thrilled, and I was excited to see what would happen between these two characters. I thought those scenes really worked. I really liked those scenes. I like that there is more Princess Leia than I expected. This is a good tribute to Carrie Fisher. But there is a scene of hers that I don't like, but we'll go into that later. Now, I obviously love the soundtrack that is composed by John Williams. Anything that he puts out for these movies is purely amazing, even for the prequels, which I still have yet to watch. Oh no. This movie also somehow got me to like Kylo Ren more. We understand his backstory, and it's not too forced into the movie. Get it? Forced. You could see that he's clearly damaged in a way that he thinks what he's doing is right. There's a scene where he reaches his hand out to Rey and says, "We could start something new." But Rey obviously doesn't accept it, and he's like, "I'm gonna go against you." I like the scene where the ship goes lightspeed through the other ship. That's another thing I wanted to add for visual effects. I thought those effects in that scene and the sound design were really good in that scene. Actually, let me take it back. There was no sound in that scene. But also something having to do with the scene I hated about. And let's go into the things I hated about the movie. Those damn porgs. This was clearly Disney's doing. They want to make more money, so they just made a cute creature that doesn't do anything simply because they like money. They have no purpose, they have no meaning, and they have no impact towards the story. This was obviously similar to George Lucas on the Ewoks, but at least those Ewoks sort of have a purpose in the story. These things just exist to make you feel bad when they're about to be eaten, so you can be like, "Oh, they're cute. I want one of those in my collection." They clearly don't have any characteristics, and they could have been cut out from the movie entirely, and that would have been fine. This annoying woman. This is also something that Disney probably had to try to force into the movie. Ha 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 ha. Get it? Force. All she does is jeopardize the rebels while being the most annoying person since Jar Jar Binks. I know that's a bit over-exaggerated, but I really dislike this woman. She just did to put the rebels in jeopardy, and then at the end of the day, Princess Leia thinks that she's a good person, and so you're supposed to feel empathy for her. Sorry, but that's not how movies work. I didn't feel empathy for her at all. Another thing about this movie is
It's too
there are some scenes in this movie that could have either been cut shorter or cut entirely from the movie. An example of a scene that could have been cut entirely was that stupid casino scene. Now honestly, I passed out in this scene, so I can't give much information about the scene. But when the movie starts making an audience member pass out, you know you've done something wrong. And the entire ending sequence could have been cut to at least 10 minutes. It drags in the third act, and that's really disappointing because the third acts are usually the strongest points in Star Wars movies. I also thought it was dumb that they're trying to force this new relationship between Finn and Rose. I like the romance between Rey and Finn way more than Finn and Rose. Sure, it wasn't all like, "Look at us, you were in love" in The Force Awakens, but you could tell that he likes her and she likes him. They completely forgot that in this new movie and make him a love interest for Rose. That's one thing that really bothered me about the movie, but unfortunately, that's not the worst thing about this movie. I thought all the deaths in this movie were purely stupid. Except this girl, she deserves to die. I thought the death of Captain Phasma could have waited till the last movie, and she could have easily been the next Boba Fett, but no, she dies. Also, I thought it was a joke when my family told me that Luke Skywalker died. Turns out, he did die, and I got pissed off at the fact that they couldn't wait for another movie to kill him off. They even did this with Yoda in Return of the Jedi, who also shows up in a ridiculous way to the point where the entire theater was laughing. But he does give a good message that I can't remember because I was also passing out in this scene, but the audience's laughter woke me up. And this scene ruined the movie entirely for me, and that is this scene right here. When Kylo Ren is about to shoot the ship and Princess Leia worries. Turns out he didn't shoot it because he doesn't have the balls to shoot the ship. But someone else shot it, and then Princess Leia's floating through space. What the hell, Disney? I don't blame any of the mess in this movie on the director at all. Now, I know killing Leia off would have been a bit unforgiving to do considering Carrie Fisher died, but making her live this way is so dumb and unrealistic. They could have easily played with the idea and explained it more, but no, she just lives. It looks entirely stupid and ridiculous, and it just disconnects you from the story and the realism of these movies that it's supposed to have. Things that make these movies so special is that even though it's science fiction, you can believe that there's some stuff that can happen to these characters and to the events happening in the film. That's what makes the original Star Wars so special. You get these scenes of just looking at characters while music plays, and you can tell what their intentions are. Force Awakens similarly does this with Rey. You get a more in-depth story towards these new characters that you just met. This is done pretty well in The Force Awakens, but not 100%. But in this movie, every time they introduced a new character, they don't explain the reason that they're in the movie. They don't even explain the backstory, except for Rose, and you don't feel any empathy for the characters whatsoever. That's what makes this film so extremely disappointing to me. Sure, it's not as good as a film as this one, not as disappointing as this one, and definitely not as bad as these ones. But as a Star Wars film, it fails to connect with me personally. If you like this film, that's great. You have experienced something that I couldn't experience while watching this film. But every time I think about everything I didn't like about this movie, I always remember at least they're not the prequels. So my final conclusion for this film is that it's not entirely terrible, but it's not that great either. I'd say it's fair to give this film a 5 out of 10.